About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street on my side was the silhouette of a man, dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Both gloriously close to me. And the thing said, "You mean 12 euros for the box?" And he spent hours dancing to box, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He dropped his form in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. The midst of which he was acting was very painfully wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking out at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward. Smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. And I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him. And then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept toward me, and then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. "What the fuck?" Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way. And this time, he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile. But he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see. Story 2. My friend and I saw the Smiling Man when I was 15. My friend and I encountered the Smiling Man. Earlier that day, I had asked my friend to stay the night because I got some weed. He said yes, and we made plans to chill. My room at the time was in the basement of my foster home. We took the window out of frame and storage room, which was connected to my room with a faulty door. We smoked in this storage room often with other friends, and nothing bad has happened. Anyway, we smoked and got real tired and called it a night. We both slept on this L-shaped couch I had on the other side of my room, away from the window. I never expected something horrifying to happen overnight. I just wanted to sleep. It started with a tap and then got louder. Both my friend and I woke up to see a man with a terrifying grin and almost bulging, bloodshot eyes just staring. It started with a tap. Not a flashlight is going to work all right, so I didn't have the light with me at the time. I don't even know how we could see him, considering how dark it was out. Then I realized quickly, and so did my friend. We left the storage room window out of frame. Instead of putting it back, we were both frozen in fear, moved our eyes towards the storage room door across the room, expecting him to enter. We looked back, and he was gone. Oh, we're in shock, since a full-grown adult could be in the storage room leading into my room. I eventually built up the courage and checked, knowing there was no escape from this situation. He wasn't in there, thank God, but to this day, I still can picture his face, and it looks just like the Smiling Man. Story 3, The Smiling Man. After the pass of my step-uncle, I was 13 or 14, Y/O. My step-uncle was a daily runner. He came home and passed away very peacefully. His heart just gave out. His wife, my step-aunt, thought that he had fallen asleep and Said, if you're that tired, just head up to bed. She called the paramedics, and I saw them giving chest compressions to the point of it looking like they were pushing on the bed of the gurney while straddling him to get him to the ambulance. The whole family drove to the hospital, everyone crying, and waited on official word. So at about midnight, the doctor came out and said, "We're sorry, he passed." I was standing in the middle of the hallway looking towards the door where my uncle had passed, about 20 feet away. A man, must have been about 6'5", in all black clothing, facing forward, was facing my right at the end of the hallway, turns and looks at me with a massive smile. Standing there, I knew that he wasn't natural, completely out of place in this hospital, in all black clothes. And he sat down into a wheelchair and gets wheeled off, while still staring at me, smiling. No one in my family saw him, just me. Froze me to my core. Story 4. The smiling man is real. For years, I've been looking for someone who's had a similar experience as I did. One of the most terrifying experiences of my life, actually. Year after year, I came up with nothing at all, until tonight. Your story, for the exception of a few minor differences, was almost exactly what happened to me. It was the summer of 1975. I was 14 years old and had gone to see my mom that evening, who lived down the block from us. I lived with my dad, and they had separated years before, but lived in close proximity. When I got to my mom's apartment, she sent me to the store to pick up some Coca-Cola. I took off to go to the corner candy store. It was already dark outside and just a few people walking up and down the block. As I walked towards the corner, I noticed there was someone walking towards me. I noticed his shoes first, and they seemed to make an impression on me for some reason. I remember they were a caramel color boot, and they zippered up on the sides. At one point, a voice inside my head started yelling at me to cross the street. Cross the street now! The voice was internal but extremely insistent. So when he crossed the street, from the corner of my eye, I saw I had passed this person, and I then decided to cross back to the street I was on after passing the figure. I felt silly for doing all of this and decided to turn around to see who it was I felt I needed to cross the street for. When I did, my blood ran cold. This thing was standing there looking at me with the most evil grimace, as if he knew I was going to turn to look at him. His face was white, almost translucent. Lips were red and eyes were an ice blue. His hair was like a rusty red, and that smile froze me in fear. At that moment, I heard that same voice I had heard before, insisting I break my stare. It took a few minutes, but I did, and I ran towards the corner. When I looked back, he was positioned in front of my mother's window, looking up in a most unnatural way. I ran up more towards the corner, then looked back again, and he was gone. I'll never forget this encounter, and I truly believe I encountered some sort of evil being or spirit. This truly happened to me, and I'll never forget it. Story 5. Scene in Oldham. I live in a pretty secluded area of Oldham, near my school, so I'm pretty sure that it was the smiling man. I was in school and was outside, playing hide-and-seek with my friends. I'm in high school, but we were in the more empty part of my school, outside area, so it was all good. Suddenly, the invocation bell rang. It was lunch, so people were annoyed, but went to the nearest classrooms. I was on the way to my English room. my next class, to hide there, when I realized my bag was still outside. So I needed to get it. It had my phone and homework, books. I was almost there when I heard a tapping sound and somebody slowly running towards me in a dancing way. I was confused and decided to grab my bag and hide somewhere else in the outside area. I eventually found a staircase with wall at its top. So I went up and looked at a figure in a suit, its skin pale, and its mouth so wide, its teeth so white. It was so eerie. I fell back out of shock, and it suddenly laughed like a madman and crawled up the wall. I know this because it crawled over the top of the wall. I kicked its face. As its hand hit the floor, its head and body went back into itself, and it fell off the wall. I ran and ran until I got to the main corridor, and suddenly I looked back, and it was on the ceiling, chasing me until it dropped next to me. I looked around and saw the door was sort of ajar, meaning I could run if I knocked him down again. I whacked him with my bag after getting my phone and ran. I'm super scared for myself. What if I come back to school and it comes back to kill me? Story 6. It's been a few years, but I didn't understand who or what it was at first. So a few years ago, I was maybe 15 or 16, and I'm 20 now. I had a series of nightmares for a long while. Every night I was having extremely vivid, evil nightmares, which consisted of demonic possession, killings, fires, etc. In each dream, whatever evil there was after me, and it was after the people that I loved. On the very last night of these nightmares, though, I woke up from one because my dog was hunched over me on my bed, growling at my doorway. We all know the difference in our dog's growls. We know when it's playful and when something is wrong. I knew something was wrong because not only was my dog hunched over me and protecting me, but his growl was mean. His growl indicated he was ready to kill whatever was there. So I rolled over in my bed to look. Standing in my doorway, I saw a tall, skinny man staring at me. His smile was wide, and his chin pointed downwards. His eyes were wide, and you could feel the negative energy in the room. Not only that, but it was late at night. My dad and siblings were asleep, and all the lights in the house were off, but I saw him perfectly because he had this deep orange aura surrounding him. He wore a top hat, and he didn't move from his spot in my doorway. I didn't scream. I was petrified. I just hugged my dog and rolled back over and said the Lord's Prayer over and over and over again, until I finally fell asleep again. The next time I woke up, it was morning. I never had another nightmare like those, and I never saw that man again. The image of him, though, it's burned in my brain. I remember what he looked like and how he made me feel like it happened yesterday. Story 7. My friend and I saw the Smiling Man. One night when I was 15, my friend and I encountered the Smiling Man. Earlier that day, I had asked my friend to stay the night because I got some weed. He said yes, and we made plans to chill. My room at the time was in the basement of my foster home. We took the window out of frame in the storage room, which was connected to my room with a faulty door. We smoked in this storage room often with other friends, and nothing bad has happened. Anyway, we smoked and got real tired and called it a night. We both slept on this L-shaped couch I had on the other side of my room away from the window. I never expected something horrifying to happen overnight. I just wanted to sleep. It started with a tap and then got louder. Both my friend and I woke up to see a man with a terrifying grin and almost bulging bloodshot eyes, just staring. I could see his breath on the window and everything. I don't even know how we could see him considering how dark it was out. Then I realized quickly, and so did my friend. We left the storage room window out of frame instead of putting it back. We were both frozen in fear, moved our eyes towards the storage room door across the room, expecting him to enter. We looked back, and she looked a bit like the Titan that ate Aaron's mom. I told her to get out. She wasn't allowed in here. She didn't respond, and then I woke up. But I went back to sleep, and this time I was in a different location, being haunted by a man equally tall and lanky, same creepy wide smile on his face. His skin was white. He had black slicked back hair, narrow facial features, and an intense creepy look in his eyes staring straight ahead at me. He was dressed in vintage formal dress clothing. I think it was a dress shirt and a vest. I don't remember if he had a coat on. I could feel unpleasant vibrations coming from him and causing me to vibrate as well. He was definitely trying to haunt me. I went into another room in this building, and I could no longer see him, but I could feel his presence. I decided, fuck it, I'm not gonna let him haunt me. So I called him out and asked him to face me. He came into the room at me with incredible speed, and I stared face to face with him. I told him I wasn't scared of him, even though I was a little, but I stood my ground. I got so close to him that I put my face inside of his head and just held it there, facing my fear. Then I woke up. When I looked him up and saw artists' renditions of what he looks like, I was surprised to see how accurate it is. And then, reading stories here of people encountering him in their dreams, I realized this is a malevolent demon or entity that enjoys haunting humans. Some of the IRL or real-life stories seem fake, but there are a few that seem believable.